Local companies using quite a lot of this square section steel tubing. It's 20mm diameter with a 2mm wall, all nicely anodised. I think they're doing that themselves actually. And they've got these plastic end caps which are simply covering up the ends on the section, but these are coming in a little bit too long, so they're having to cut them down on a bandsaw in a jig, which is adding to the time to assemble these things, and obviously they're having to deburr around the edges as well. So they've asked me if I can churn out a few thousand of these, custom made to the right size with their logo on the end, and because these things need to be fitted and then later on removed, we've decided we're going to put a very slight lip along a couple of the sides just to make it easier for the end user to take them out. So I've basically got to recreate this, and I'm not sure if it's visible very clearly, but there are a couple of slightly raised lugs, grips along the sides, and for some reason they've decided to do them horizontally. I personally would have done them vertically, because this slight overhang that they've got as a result of these grip points means that the mould has got to open sideways as well as front and back. So they seem to have made life a little difficult for themselves there. Presumably there was an initial reason why they did this. But I'm basically going to copy this design and put the grips going vertically so that it will extract out of the mould a little easier. And we'll see how we get on with this. I think it's high density polyethylene. There's a bit of sinking around the edges. I might go with a slightly softer material, but we'll see how we get on. We can change the material at a later date. So that's the mission, and obviously I'm going to need some sort of corping on the inside of here, and then it's not going to be too dissimilar from a mould I did a while ago for some end caps. So basically we're going to have a base plate with 4 cores raised up for creating that hollow section, and then there'll be a skirt which goes around them, and obviously a feed plate which just clips on top. So a 3-plate mould plus some core pins that I've got to make, and that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to have a base plate with some holes in it, then I'm going to bolt that to the top, and then I'm going to machine out the 4 cores that I need here, and then disassemble that, and then get started on the main mould itself. And hopefully it won't be too arduous, but it does need to be a push fit, and of course plastic shrinks after you've moulded it, so I might design this slightly oversized, but we'll see. I might need to make some adjustments once we've had a go at moulding it. But anyway, I'll get started by just drilling a few holes in here and here, mount them together, and then start pocketing out the all-important cores. Right, this is the prep work complete. Basically I've got a 10mm plate with a couple of guide holes here, and some 2.5mm tapped out to 3mm holes in the back, and these are going, what did I do, 6.5mm deep, because I actually need this 10mm plate to come down to 8mm, so I've got 2mm to screw off the back. And then this is the first plate I did, which is simply to hold everything in place while I'm working on it. So I've cut a couple of guide pin holes at the end, and then these are all 3mm through holes with a 6mm by 3.5 counter bore. So in theory they will screw together with a collection of screws, and that should locate the top to the bottom, which means I can then machine right the way through this top plate to create those square core blocks that I need, and they should stay attached to this, because otherwise it's going to be a pain trying to clamp those, because I've got a machine all the way around. Right, well that seems to be pretty close to centre. So we'll just give that a little bit of a tighten. And then first job is to take a couple of millimetres off here. Okay, to cut out these core blocks I'm using a 3mm end mill with a 3° taper on it, and that'll just give a bit of a draft angle which should help lift the parts out. Well, in between breaking bits and having problems with the microphone, we do finally have these core blocks machined out. So if I can remove one, we can have a look and see if they're any good. Yep, well it's loose at least. Come on, there we go. And there we go, and yeah, okay, that's not too bad. It might need a little bit of a sand around that edge. That one's not too bad, that one's not too bad. Bit of a chamfer on the top. And our holes look pretty much where they're supposed to be. So that's an awful lot of work just to make 4 of these little blocks, but they're quite important for the rest of the mould. So now I've got those, we'll crack on with the base plate. Okay, this is going to be the base plate, and all we need on here are a load of holes and some slots at the sides just so that we can separate the plates afterwards. So this shouldn't take too long. Start with 4 counterbore holes, which are going to be used for some little cap head bolts for holding this plate into the main moulding machine. 4 5mm holes, which are for receiving magnets, which will help keep the plates together, stop them bouncing out when the mould opens and closes. A couple of 5mm holes which will be tapped to M6 for taking our 10mm cap head bolts, and these will serve as our guide pins for when we put the plates together. 4 pairs of 2 3mm holes, which will be used for bolting these little core blocks in place. Now that's our 4 separating slots, 2mm deep. Not a critical feature, but you'll never get the things out of the mould if you don't. Okay, final step on this plate is just to counterbore these 8 holes from behind, and I'm going to use these guide pin holes to get a reference. So that's the first one. that's the second one. Go back and check the first. Okay, still on that one. Just recheck the other. Spot on. Right, that's close enough because these are only counter bores. That will do it reasonably accurately. Right, that's that plate done. Okay, this is the top plate, and we're going to need a few holes in here as usual, plus a feed hole in the centre and some runners. I'm also going to be engraving a company logo on the tops of the caps, so I've polished the surface in preparation for that. And basically, if you're going to be doing any engraving, which is probably going to be about a couple of 100 microns deep, then you need to do the polishing, sand it down, increasingly fine sandpaper, wire wool, get rid of all the little streaks you get in the plate from it being rolled, and polish the hell out of it before you do the engraving, because otherwise you tend to roll the edges over when you're doing the sanding and polishing effect. So I've already prepped this, and it's not far off a mirror finish, and so we'll just engrave through here, and with a bit of luck we won't need to do anything after that. Right, well I think I'll call that quits for this evening. I've got my 4 magnet holes in the corner, a couple of holes for the guide pins, a feed, and a couple of 6mm runners, and I've just added a couple of separating slots on either side. And it's starting to get dark outside now. Well, it is dark outside now, and I'm supposed to be going out in half an hour, so that's about all I can do. Tomorrow I'll finish this off and add the engraving for little light bulbs where the tops of the cavities are, and then we'll make a start on the central surround plate, which is probably the hardest of the ones to make, but enough for tonight. I think we'll call that quits.